Hi, and welcome to Website Critiques with Bryan and Chris. I'm Bryan.
And I'm Chris.
All right, and we have Mike's website up here that we are going to pull up for critique. So here we go. This is the homepage. What's your initial thought?
Accountant.
Accountant. Do you think he looks like an accountant?
Well, just it's a sleek website. Like it definitely
Yeah.
looks very sleek, but I'm wondering it's very corporate feeling, and maybe
Yeah.
that's exactly what he's looking for. Like looking at his photography, but I mean, hey, that's him. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a negative. It's just kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, cool. What are your thoughts on? We've talked in previous critiques about the header, like the sort of it going through different images. What are your thoughts on it in this particular situation?
I think he's trying to use it to tell a story. He's
Yeah.
trying to tell a story of like what he's doing, what kind of photography he does. So in that case, I think it's effective, but I don't know if that's the right story to start with, right? I don't know. It's tough. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's for me from like it's funny because we always end up having this like interesting, like you always have the design thought, right? And then I'm always like, okay, from like a very sales perspective, it feels mixed because he's got this great sort of corporate image and then this great studio portrait, and then it looks like a high school senior, and there's no connection between them. And so if I'm looking for commercial work, great, I love that first image, and then all of a sudden I see the high school senior and I'm like, what does this mean for me? That's kind of always my challenge with having a website that serves multiple audiences. If you don't give them, we talked about this in previous videos, if you don't give them that sort of like hallway of doors approach where it's like, hey, where can we take you? If you start showing imagery right away, my biggest concern with that is you're always going to start turning people away, because they're going to in this example, it's high school seniors might turn the corporate people away. If you're looking for beautiful studio portraits, you might see the commercial image and be turned away. Like, I just wonder if you're not speaking to the right people just yet. I'd almost rather let them click in to then see that kind of work.
Yeah.
That's my concern with that.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I mean, because we're looking at, it's not like you're doing very similar photography here. You're doing completely different audiences, absolutely completely different audiences, right? So it has to have a different feel. So it's not like it's like a little pet shop website that you're making. So it's very clear you're making a website for pet owners. This is all kinds of different audiences, so it's really hard branding wise to really pull that together and messaging wise to pull that together if it's all on one website, right?
Totally.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I'm seeing is, so he's got his sort of like sort of brand statement here, which I like. Bringing light to the heart of every story. I think that's nice. It's a little kind of vague, right? It's kind of like, what does that mean? Like bringing light to the heart of every story. It's kind of a little bit poetic, which I think is nice. But I worry that sometimes when we get too I think we talked about this previously too. When we get too poetic as photographers, it might sound nicer. It might kind of feel very like beautiful and whimsical and whatever. But you risk confusing people. Like if they don't know what you mean, they're going to have to burn mental calories to actually try to decipher what it is you're actually trying to say. I think even actually Don in StoryBrand talks a lot about that. He's like, just get rid of the bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Just like get to the point that you're trying to
write
make.
it for a Neanderthal.
Yeah.
Write it for the caveman.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you're not worrying about all this kind of fanciness. I think a lot of times you're right. We get into this kind of situation where like, oh, this is so cool. Like, look how beautiful this sounds. Then we run it by like family and friends, and of course they're like, yeah, that sounds so cool, right? Because nobody wants to disappoint you. But at the end of the day, it's probably not connecting to people because they probably don't see it. Or they don't understand it right away. And if you have to explain it, then you've lost it, right?
Yeah.
So, I think getting to the point is important, right? So I would definitely think that.
The thing I want to make, I mean, obviously these are website critiques, so the whole point is that we're tearing down these websites and talking about them. Mike's actually done a great job. Like, I think like for all intents and purposes, like I really like what Mike's done here. It's a clean design. It's a nice website. He's done a lot of things right here. But when you submit your website to be critiqued by us, we're going to critique, right? So we're going to get into all those kinds of little details. This is all just to kind of take it that little extra mile, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. I think Mike did a great job to begin with. As I scrolled, actually, I noticed the nav bar doesn't stick. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I like when nav bars stick because it gives me quick access to get around. What are your thoughts?
Definitely on this site, I think, because as you scroll, these links here, I mean, they're really at the top. It is actually a really pretty looking bar. I really like what he did with the logo here, kind of coming these 2 lines in and then not doing it in the middle. I think it actually works pretty good. If that scrolled down the whole page, I mean, it is a bit tall, but I mean, realistically, it would look really cool. And the other thing is just kind of the navigation structure, which we're going to get into. But some of these actually link to the same page where others go to other pages. So, just kind of playing with the site before we started, it was kind of a little frustrating that like some of them would go to a spot in the page and then you'd have to scroll up to get to a different page. So if I was looking for something in particular, just kind of quickly scanning the site, which most people do, it might be really confusing. One thing that I thought, this is really muted and this is really big. And a lot of times this happens where we want to make our logo or typeface really, really, really big, which I don't think we necessarily need to, right? This logo isn't as important as a marketing message that's going to grab somebody's attention and bring them into your brand. That's just my opinion.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah. But I really like what he did design-wise here. It's really muted. There's lots of text, but it's really muted. I think the spacing a little wise is kind of funky. There's a rule in design called proximity, which is basically how far something is away. We automatically group things together as humans when we're looking at something. We automatically group something together based on how close it is to each other and how far away it is from other things. So with that rule in mind, what I would recommend is actually bringing in the space here and the space here so this whole section actually comes in and it feels like it's more together, because this almost feels like it's a part of here, this almost feels like it's alone, and this read more feels like it's part of this image right down here, which it isn't, right? So things like that just to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what are your thoughts in terms of chaos on the page? I want to get into this navigation. I think in the next video we'll get into that because there's some thoughts that I know we've already kind of pre-discussed, but there's so he's using 2 images plus the text here. He's got graphical elements over here as the dividing line and that kind of thing. Just as you scroll, like if you kind of something I like to do sometimes when I'm looking at sort of long form pages like this is I kind of blur my eyes or squint my eyes a little bit and just kind of go through it. And there's as I do that, I'm like, there's a lot happening. Do you think it's too chaotic, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, honestly, I think proximity would help a lot. Moving things away from each other, like actually getting more space in between sections and then bringing sections together a little bit. And then just keeping in mind, like if you've ever studied like grid, I know you have like grid design and grid layout and all that kind of stuff. One of the big parts of that is actually having what's called an anchor element or kind of a big element, right? Which is this is what this is doing here. So just making sure that you have that big anchor element on the side, that you're spacing everything out so things feel attached to it. In each section, right? So here, I think it really falls apart because this philosophy piece, this nice big text right here, which is beautiful. It's an HTML. Google's going to pick that up. Screen readers are going to pick that up, so it's great. But I find that like it's trying to tie this section together, but then there's a lot of space here. This is way too close
to that picture.
This is way too close, right? So if that was actually spaced way down, and this was almost a little softened, so it doesn't roll in with this button, or that button almost came out a little bit. I think it would help a lot. As you're scrolling through this, it wouldn't feel so overwhelming. Same thing here, just, there's not really any rhyme or reason as to why there's a little bit of space here and then a ton of space in between. Like it kind of breaks this natural flow of the page.
Yeah, totally.
Design-wise.
What are your thoughts from a design perspective on alignment? I don't know, maybe it could be the OCD side of me, but like this button doesn't quite line up with the bottom there, but it's almost there, but not quite. Services, same thing with up here. It's like the top's not lining up, but it's almost there like it should, but it's not quite. Like, what are your thoughts on like, should things be lining up or no?
Well, that's always a hard thing, right? Because I mean, up until very recently, it's been really difficult to actually have things line up top to bottom in a section, only because we want our sites to be responsive, which means as we resize our screen, things are reflowing. So this paragraph here will actually get more narrow, which then makes it taller, right? So, however, there are new tools on the web that allow us to kind of pull more stuff off. But again, I always worry more about the left to right and then how balanced it feels inside versus things lining up perfectly.
Awesome. Great. In the next video, we're going to dive into some more of Mike's homepage, so we'll see you in that one.